My name is Claire Holloway. I'm 30 years old, and the night my family threw me out, I learned that in some homes, the loudest lie always gets believed first. My sister stood in the yard crying so hard you'd think her whole life had just been destroyed, pointing at me and saying I had ruined her marriage. My mother didn't ask one question. My father didn't ask for proof. He just stared at me with disgust and shouted, "Get out! You're not worthy of this family." Then he started throwing my things onto the lawn. My shoes hit the wet grass. My books landed in the dirt. A picture frame cracked against the walkway. My sister kept sobbing that I had introduced her husband to the woman who destroyed their home, that I had opened the door to his betrayal, that none of this would have happened if I had stayed out of her life. I knew she was lying. I knew it instantly. But when your own mother won't look at you and your father is pushing your suitcase off the porch with his foot, truth starts to feel smaller than shame. So I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I picked up what I could, walked to the curb, and left. 1 week later, I was sitting alone in a rented carriage house with a book open in my lap, trying to teach my body what quiet felt like again, when an email arrived. The sender made me sit up. The subject line made my stomach drop. I opened it, read it once, then again, and by the time I reached the attachment, I understood exactly why my sister had been so desperate to blame me first. Within 20 minutes, my phone exploded. My sister: "Please don't send that email." My mom: "We were wrong. Please give us one chance." My dad: "We need to talk. Come home." I stared at the screen, thought about the shattered frame in the yard, and replied with 2 words: "No, never." But before I show you what was inside that email and why it turned my family from righteous to terrified in under an hour, tell me this. If your own parents threw you out over a lie, would you ever forgive them? The truth is, the night I got thrown out wasn't the beginning. It was just the moment my sister's lie finally found an audience. I moved into a tiny carriage house on the east side of Savannah 2 days later. It had thin walls, narrow stairs, a crooked kitchen drawer that never fully closed, and one small window above the sink facing a brick wall. It wasn't pretty, but it was mine, and there was something strangely comforting about being in a place where nobody could suddenly decide I didn't belong. I worked as a collections manager at a maritime museum, which sounds grander than it is. Most days, my job meant preserving old maps, cataloging instruments from dead ships, and handling objects that had survived storms, war, salt water, and time. I used to think that made me calm under pressure. After what happened with my family, I realized it just made me good at handling damaged things. My older sister, Vanessa Holloway, lived in a different world entirely. She chaired charity events, smiled for local magazines, hosted brunches for people who loved being photographed helping others, and moved through Savannah as if every room existed to spotlight her. Her husband, Adam Keller, was an architect, quiet, polite, carefully spoken. The kind of man people trusted immediately because he never seemed to need attention. To outsiders, they looked perfect. To people who knew Vanessa well enough, they looked managed. 3 days after I moved out, my best friend Nina Brooks showed up with takeout, 2 paper plates, and enough anger on my behalf to heat the whole house. Nina designed museum exhibits, wore paint smudges on her jeans like they were part of her personality, and once got banned from a donor luncheon for telling a board member his vision was just expensive nonsense with bad lighting. She sat cross-legged on my floor while I told her everything: the accusation, the shouting, the boxes in the yard, the way my mother never once asked whether it was true. When I finished, Nina said, "That story is too clean. Vanessa didn't panic and invent that on the spot. She built it before she needed it." I wanted to argue, mostly because I was tired enough to doubt myself. Or maybe I missed something. I said. Maybe I really did put Adam around the wrong person at the wrong time. Nina set down her fork and looked straight at me. Claire, that is exactly what people like Vanessa rely on. They make you question your own memory while they walk everyone else toward the version that protects them. Then she said the sentence that changed the direction of everything. So stop thinking emotionally and start thinking historically. What happened before the lie? The next day, while I was relabeling brass navigation tools in museum storage, Nina texted me, "Chloe Mercer will talk. Don't waste it." Chloe had co-chaired charity galas with Vanessa and had one of those social brains that remembered everything. Who arrived late, who left early, who smiled too fast, who drank too much, who said one thing in public and another in the hallway. We met her that evening at a wine bar near Forsyth Park. She was wearing bright red lipstick and the expression of a woman who regretted agreeing to this before we even sat down. At first, she gave us polished nonsense. Vanessa was under pressure. The divorce had been emotional. Families were complicated. Then Nina leaned forward and said, "That's elegant, Chloe, but it doesn't answer the real question. Why was Vanessa so ready to blame Claire?" Chloe went quiet. She stirred the ice in her glass once and lowered her voice. "Because she was already scared of something else," she said. My pulse jumped. "What something else?" She hesitated, then finally said, "There were rumors about Vanessa and a man from the restoration board. Nothing public, just whispers. Enough that she started watching Adam closely, almost like she needed him to be guilty before anyone looked too hard at her. That was the first real crack." Then Chloe gave us a name, Grant Ellis. "He handled logistics for the spring preservation weekend," she said. "If anyone knows who is where, he does." After Chloe left, I sat there staring at my glass. Nina was already reaching for her bag like the night had only just started. But when I got home, the adrenaline wore off and left me with something uglier. Exhaustion. Real exhaustion. The kind that makes disappearing seem easier than fighting. I looked at the unread messages from my mother asking me to be reasonable, and for a few minutes, I honestly considered letting all of it go. Let them keep the lie. Let them keep each other. Let them pretend I was the problem if it bought me peace. Then my phone buzzed. Nina had sent me a picture of the crooked drawer in my kitchen with one line underneath it. "Even this drawer knows it's broken. Doesn't mean you pretend it works." I laughed in spite of myself. That stupid message kept me from quitting. And the next morning, I went to meet Grant. Grant Ellis met us at an oyster place on the river, and from the second he sat down, it was obvious he hated mess. He looked like the kind of man who ironed his shirts while listening to classical music and used calendar reminders for things most people trusted themselves to remember. His voice was calm, his watch perfectly polished, and his first words were, "I'm not here for revenge. I'm here because your sister crossed a line." That told me more than gossip could have. Men like Grant don't step into drama unless their silence has started to feel like guilt. He explained that the rumors about Vanessa had started months before the divorce filing. She had been spending too much time with Daniel Cross, a married preservation consultant who moved through Savannah's nonprofit world like he belonged everywhere and nowhere at once. At first, it was easy to explain away. Committee meetings, donor planning, event schedules. Then came late-night strategy calls, unusual room requests during board weekends, and two separate moments when Vanessa started asking strange questions about Adam. Which women he had spoken to at museum events, whether he had seemed distracted lately, whether anyone had mentioned him talking to someone new. "That's what bothered me," Grant said. "She wasn't asking like a wife who was worried. She was asking like someone drafting a defense before the accusation arrived." My chest went cold. "You're sure?" He gave me a look so level it almost embarrassed me for asking. "Claire, I manage people for a living. I know the difference between panic and planning. Then he slid a folded printout across the table. It was a logistics sheet from a preservation weekend in Charleston. Most of it was routine: arrival times, room notes, vendor contacts. But there, handwritten in the margin, were two discrete adjustments: Vanessa Holloway, Daniel Cross. Same floor, same wing. Quiet reassignment. No spouses copied. Nina exhaled under her breath. I stared at the page and felt my stomach tighten. It was something, but not enough. Not for people like my parents. Not for a woman like Vanessa. She can explain this away, I said. Work-related, coincidence, bad optics. Grant nodded. Probably, which is why you need something from inside the marriage. He gave me Adam's name before I asked. He suspected something was wrong long before she filed, but Vanessa got loud first, and once she did, everyone else stopped asking questions. I contacted Adam that evening. I expected silence, maybe anger, maybe a polite refusal. Instead, he replied in less than 10 minutes. I'll meet. Tomorrow works. We met the next morning on a shaded bench in one of Savannah's old squares. Adam looked like a man who had been losing sleep for months and only recently admitted it. He didn't waste time. Vanessa told both our families that you introduced me to some woman through the museum, he said. She said emotional boundaries got crossed. I looked him straight in the eye. Did they? His whole face hardened. No. I spoke to that donor twice, both times in public, and both conversations lasted maybe 5 minutes. Vanessa needed a version of events that made her look wounded instead of guilty. I handed him Grant's printout. He read it slowly, jaw tightening. I knew it, he muttered. Then he told me something that shifted the entire story. Months earlier, one of Vanessa's hotel confirmations had synced to an old shared tablet by accident. She deleted it before he could save it, but he remembered the hotel name because it wasn't one they used as a couple and had no reason to. The moment he said it, my whole body went still. The Ashcroft House Hotel, a boutique property outside Savannah. I knew it because the museum had hosted a donor dinner there the previous year, and I had coordinated the reservation contact lists. That meant if Vanessa had reused an old booking profile tied to that event and forgotten to remove my museum email from the back-end notification system, any correction, billing summary, or automated room notice could have been sent to me by mistake. It was a long shot, and before we chased it, the universe threw us a distraction. Chloe texted Nina that same afternoon, breathless with new gossip. Apparently, some woman at church claimed Daniel wasn't even the only man Vanessa had gotten too close to. For 2 hours, Nina and I chased that lead hard. It went nowhere. Dead end, bad gossip. Maybe deliberate noise. I sat at my kitchen table that night with a headache and a pile of papers and said, "What if this whole thing is just whispers and coincidence?" Nina leaned against my counter, arms folded. Then we find out and stop. But we do not stop just because Vanessa is better at performance than you are. She was right, so instead of confronting my sister with half proof and letting her cry her way out of it, I opened my laptop and started digging for something she couldn't act over. Something that wouldn't care how convincingly she cried. Something written down. The next day was torture. I spent the morning at the museum pretending to function like a normal human being while my thoughts kept circling the same possibility. During lunch, I pulled archived files from the museum's donor dinner at Ashcroft House and searched every old logistics sheet, rooming list, and notification profile I could find. There it was. An internal event profile from the previous year with my museum email attached as a secondary contact for reservation adjustments and billing corrections. Not private guest notes, but the administrative overflow nobody thinks about until it goes wrong. If Vanessa had reused part of that event profile while booking a private stay and failed to remove my address, The hotel system could absolutely send me something by mistake. That was all I needed. A path. I drafted a careful message to guest relations. I didn't accuse anyone. I didn't mention an affair or my family or Vanessa's divorce. I simply explained that I believed my museum email might still be attached in error to a reused booking profile from a previous nonprofit event and asked whether any recent administrative notices had been misrouted. Then I sent it and tried not to check my inbox every 3 minutes like a lunatic. By the following afternoon, I was starting to think the lead was dead. By 3 o'clock, I hated myself for hoping. By 4, I was in the museum's prep room holding a restored brass compass and thinking maybe proof wouldn't matter anyway. Maybe my family had already chosen the story they preferred because it was easier than shame. Then my phone buzzed. One new email. Sender: Ashcroft House Guest Relations. Subject: Correction of secondary notification contact / attached billing summary. I set the compass down and opened the email. The first line was polite. The second changed everything. The hotel apologized for the inconvenience and confirmed that my email address had mistakenly remained attached as a secondary notification contact on a reused executive reservation profile. Attached, for my records, were the corrected booking notices and billing summaries that had been generated before the error was discovered. My hands didn't shake, not at first. I opened the PDF and read every page. Vanessa Holloway, Daniel Cross, 2 adjoining suites, 2 separate weekends, privacy preference requested, late night wine service, valet logs, room service after midnight, 1 note mentioning discreet access arrangements. I went back to the body of the email and read it again because I needed to be absolutely certain I understood what I was looking at. And there it was, plain and devastating. This wasn't gossip, suspicion, or some mysterious anonymous warning. It was a clean administrative correction from the hotel itself, explaining that my old museum email had stayed tied to a reused reservation profile and that the attached records had been generated before the mistake was fixed. That was the email. That was the thing my family became terrified of. A boring, professional, impossible to cry over confirmation that my sister had been exactly where she should not have been, with exactly the man she should not have been with, during the same stretch of time she was accusing me of ruining her marriage. I texted Nina 3 words. I have it. She called immediately. Read it to me. I did. By the time I finished, she was already in her car. We sat in the museum parking lot with the attachment open between us, and she said, "This is why people like Vanessa fear paperwork. Drama can be argued with. Records can't." I still had a choice to make: send it immediately or confront Vanessa first. I chose confrontation, partly because I wanted to see her face when the performance failed, partly because cornered liars sometimes reveal more than they intend. She opened the door to her townhouse in a cream sweater and polished makeup, like the woman who had sobbed in our parents' yard had been played by a body double. "What do you want?" she snapped. I stepped inside before she could block me. "To know why you blamed me for your divorce before anyone even asked what you were hiding." She gave a hard little laugh. "You're unbelievable." I held up my phone. Ashcroft House disagrees. The reaction was tiny, but I saw it. A flicker, a pause. A second where the actress inside her missed her cue. "What are you talking about?" she asked. I handed her the first page of the billing summary. Her fingers tightened. Her eyes dropped. When she looked back up, fear had finally replaced performance. "Where did you get this?" she whispered. "From the email your carelessness sent to the wrong person," I said. She tried denial, then outrage, then offense. "So now you're spying on me?" "No," I said. "You reused an old profile and accidentally told on yourself." She turned away, then said the one thing that made the whole room go cold. Adam was already leaving. I stepped closer. Then why blame me? She spun back and hissed, because you were convenient. 4 words. That was it. No sorrow, no apology, no panic, just entitlement. My life had been easier to sacrifice than her reputation. That sentence killed the last bit of sympathy I had left. I walked out without saying another word. Halfway down the block, my phone started lighting up with calls from my mother, then my father, then Vanessa. I didn't answer. They already knew. The only question now was what I would do with it. That night, Nina and I spread everything across my kitchen table like we were building a legal exhibit instead of surviving a family betrayal. Grant's rooming notes, Adam's timeline, the screenshot of Vanessa's threat, the hotel email itself, the attached billing summaries. The wording mattered, the order mattered, and most of all, the source mattered. If I just forwarded the hotel bills, Vanessa would say I stole them or manipulated them. But the guest relations email changed that. It explained exactly why the records came to me and made the whole thing harder to twist. We built the email carefully. No screaming, no insults, no melodrama, just chronology and proof. I addressed it to my mother, my father, Adam, and Vanessa. The subject line read, "Correction of false accusation and attached documentation." In the body, I stated that I had been falsely accused of causing Vanessa's marriage to break down by introducing Adam to another woman. I stated that on that morning I had received an administrative correction from Ashcroft House Hotel confirming my museum email had mistakenly remained attached to a reused reservation profile. I stated that the attached records documented Vanessa Holloway and Daniel Cross booking adjoining suites during the same period in which Vanessa redirected suspicion toward me. Then I attached the hotel email itself, followed by the booking summaries. At the end, I wrote one final line. I will not continue carrying blame that was manufactured to protect someone else's betrayal. I sent it at 8:12 that morning. 7 minutes later, Vanessa called. Then again. Then my mother. Then my father. I didn't answer any of them. At 8:29, the text started. Vanessa, please don't send that email anywhere else. My mother, we were wrong. Please give us one chance. My father, we need to talk. Come home. Then another from him. This has to stay private. Private. That word almost made me laugh. There had been nothing private about having my belongings thrown into the yard like trash. I stared at the screen, remembered the sound of my father's voice telling me I wasn't worthy of the family, and sent back 2 words. No, never. Adam called from a number I still had unsilenced, and when I answered, he was quiet for a moment before saying, "Thank you." Not because he was happy, not because truth made divorce easier, but because someone had finally written down what Vanessa had spent weeks trying to bury in performance. He told me his attorney would use the email and attachments. He also said Daniel's wife had already questioned some unexplained hotel charges once before and been lied to. Now she had reason to stop accepting vague answers. Around noon, my mother showed up at the museum. A volunteer came to tell me an upset woman was waiting in the lobby, and the second I saw her standing beneath the mural of storm-tossed ships, twisting the strap of her purse, I knew why she'd come. "Claire, please," she said the second she saw me. "Don't do this to us." That word, us, landed like an insult. "You already did something to me," I said. "You threw me out without asking one single question." She started crying immediately. "Vanessa told us—" "I know what Vanessa told you," I cut in. "I want to know why my own mother didn't care whether it was true." She tried the usual language: emotion, confusion, family, panic. Then the real sentence finally slipped out. "If this spreads, Vanessa could lose everything." There it was. Not grief for me, fear for her. "She should have thought of that before she used my life as padding," I said. She reached for my arm. I stepped back. "Come home," she whispered. "We can fix this." I looked at her for a long moment and said, "A house is not home when it throws out the wrong daughter to protect the guilty one." That evening, my father texted asking me to come to the house for one conversation. I went because part of me needed to hear what truth sounded like in that room once the lie stopped working. Vanessa was already there, pale, angry. My mother had tissues ready on the coffee table. My father stood behind his chair like posture might somehow create dignity. He opened with, "You've made your point." I said, "No, the documents made my point. I just forwarded them." Vanessa started talking about pressure, loneliness, emotional strain, how marriages are complicated, how mistakes happen. Then she softened her voice and said, "I never meant for Claire to get hurt this badly." I stared at her. "You used my name before anyone asked questions. You meant for me to get hurt enough to save you." For the first time all evening, nobody interrupted me. My father finally asked, "What do you want?" That was the first real question anyone had asked me since the yard. "I want the truth said clearly," I answered. "I did not cause your divorce. I did not betray this family. I was thrown out because Vanessa lied." The silence dragged. Then my father said, without looking at me, "You didn't cause the divorce?" My mother added, "We acted too quickly." Too quickly. Not cruelly, not shamefully. Too quickly. Then I looked at Vanessa and asked, "Do you admit it?" She closed her eyes and whispered, "Yes." It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt late, thin, cowardly. And then my father ruined even that by saying, "Now we need to handle this as a family." That was when I understood exactly what they wanted. Not justice, not healing, containment. So I stood up and said, "You are not asking for forgiveness. You are asking for control." No one denied it. I walked out for the second time, and this time nobody pretended they didn't know why. Once the truth was written down, it stopped belonging only to my family. Adam's attorney requested copies of the hotel email and attachments, and I sent them. Daniel Cross abruptly resigned from 2 preservation committees within the same week. One donor family quietly pulled back from an event Vanessa was supposed to help lead. A charity co-chair found a scheduling excuse to distance herself. None of that happened because I ran around town telling everyone my business. It happened because once proof exists, people start asking their own questions. And my sister had built her entire life on the assumption that nobody ever would. 3 days later, Vanessa showed up at my carriage house alone. No makeup, no polished smile, no witnesses. She stood behind the screen door with her arms wrapped around herself as if she were cold. "Can I come in?" she asked. I kept the screen between us. "Say what you came to say." She looked smaller than usual, but not softer. "That's an important difference. Daniel is denying everything beyond friendship," she said. "Adam is using the records. Mom can't sleep. Dad won't even look at me. You got what you wanted." That sentence told me she still didn't understand anything. "No," I said. "What I wanted was not to be thrown out of my home over your lie." Her jaw tightened. I was desperate. "You were deliberate." She flinched at that. For a second, I almost saw honesty. "I didn't think it would go this far," she said. "It went exactly as far as you were willing to let it go, as long as it landed on me instead of you." Then she asked if I would talk to Adam and ask him to be reasonable. I actually laughed. "You blamed me for your divorce, got me thrown out, and now you want me to help manage the fallout?" "I'm your sister," she snapped. "You were," I said quietly, "right up until the moment you decided my life was acceptable collateral." She stared at me like I had betrayed her, which would have been funny if it weren't so pathetic. "So that's it?" she demanded. "You're cutting me off forever?" I thought about the years of excuses, the way she'd called me convenient, the total absence of a real apology. "No," I said. "You cut me off first. I'm just refusing to crawl back." She left furious. Oddly, that made me feel lighter. Anger meant she had heard me, even if she would never admit it. My mother called that night asking me to be compassionate. My father texted 2 days later proposing family counseling now that everything was out in the open. I ignored both. Not because I wanted revenge by then, but because I had finally learned the difference between healing and being dragged back into a performance. Around the same time, my museum director called me into her office. I walked in bracing for the possibility that Daniel Cross's name might spill into my work life. Instead, she said, "I've heard there may be personal fallout touching some nonprofit circles. If anyone tries to drag the museum or your role into gossip, we will shut it down." I nearly cried from the sheer unfamiliarity of being protected without having to beg for it. Weeks passed. The carriage house began to feel less like exile and more like a beginning. Nina helped me paint one wall sea blue because, in her words, "You need at least one surface in this place that looks like a future." She also kept bringing me small practical gifts: a toolbox, decent dish towels, labels for my pantry jars, a lamp that actually lit the whole room. Every one of those things meant more than the grand emotional messages my family started sending once they realized I wasn't automatically coming back. My mother eventually left me a voicemail saying, "I know we failed you." It was the closest she came to a real apology. My father never got that far. His remorse remained procedural, as if one corrected statement could balance public humiliation. It couldn't, and in the quiet after all of it, I realized something about revenge stories that nobody says enough. Revenge is not always about destroying someone. Sometimes it's about refusing to keep carrying what they put on you. Sometimes it's about letting truth do the heavy lifting while you step out from under the lie. About a month after the email, Adam asked to meet one last time at a coffee shop near the river. By then, the divorce had moved from shock into logistics, and he looked less shattered than before, though still tired in that deep, permanent-looking way betrayal leaves on a face. He slid a document across the table and said, "You may want this." It was a signed statement from him confirming, in plain language, that I had never interfered in his marriage, never encouraged any inappropriate relationship, and had been falsely blamed after Vanessa's involvement with Daniel Cross began to surface. I stared at it for a long moment. After weeks of defending my reality, there it was in writing from the one person whose voice made the lie impossible to revive. "You didn't have to do this," I said. He gave a tired half-smile. "Maybe not. But I'm done watching Vanessa rewrite everything." Then he added the sentence that stayed with me longer than the paper itself. "You were the only honest person in a house full of performance." That was the real center of the whole story. Performance. Vanessa performed victimhood. My mother performed peace. My father performed authority. And for years, I performed forgiveness, hoping it would eventually earn me fairness. It didn't. Once I stopped performing, everything shifted. My parents later brought over the last few things still left at their house. My mother cried in the driveway. My father carried the heaviest box like silent labor might somehow stand in for remorse. When he said, "There's always a place for you with us," I answered, "There wasn't when it mattered." He had no reply. Maybe that was the first honest silence he'd ever given me. Vanessa moved out of the townhouse not long after. Daniel Cross disappeared from the nonprofit circuit. My sister didn't lose absolutely everything. People like Vanessa rarely do. But she lost something she had always relied on: the power to shape the narrative before the facts arrived. As for me, I stayed in Savannah. I kept my job. I started sleeping through the night again. I learned which stair in the carriage house creaked and stopped hearing it as loneliness. Nina kept insisting I looked taller lately. Maybe I did. Shame bends the spine more than grief does. On the anniversary of the night I got thrown out, my mother sent one text. "I still pray you come back to us." I stared at it for a while before replying. I came back to myself. That has to be enough. And it was. Because the real ending to this story isn't just that one email changed everything, it's how it changed everything. The email was from Ashcroft House Hotel, sent by guest relations to correct a contact error Vanessa never noticed. It explained that my old museum email had mistakenly remained attached to a reused reservation profile and included billing summaries showing Vanessa and Daniel booked adjoining suites during the same week she was accusing me of ruining her marriage. That one email exposed the affair, exposed the lie, exposed how quickly my family chose convenience over truth, and exposed how terrified they became the moment paperwork replaced drama. That's why the messages came so fast. Not because they suddenly loved me better, because they suddenly understood I had proof. People talk about revenge like it has to look like fire to count. Mine didn't. Mine looked like a clean subject line, a hotel attachment, and the end of my cooperation. Mine looked like refusing to come home just because the people who broke me had finally become afraid. Mine looked like two words: no, never. My mom kicked me out because my sister blamed me for her divorce. Then one email changed everything. Not because it created the truth, but because it forced everyone hiding from it to finally see it in writing. And here's the question that still stays with me. When people only apologize after proof corners them, is that love or just fear wearing a softer face? From my personal point of view, this story feels like a powerful life lesson about truth, self-respect, and the importance of critical thinking. Sometimes people rush to judge without seeking real knowledge or understanding, and that can damage relationships deeply. That's why education, emotional awareness, and the ability to question what we hear are such valuable skills in life. Useful knowledge helps us stay calm, think clearly, and protect our integrity when situations become unfair. In the end, truth often speaks louder than accusations. So I'd like to ask you, if you were in this situation, would you fight to prove the truth, or would you choose to walk away and start fresh?